Hello everyone, my name is Liz and welcome back to the Poppy Library. I am coming to you from Austin, Texas, where it feels like the surface of the sun. This is Notes from a Knitter. Welcome back, guys. This is a different kind of version of Notes from the Knitter. A knitter. Wow, Notes from a Knitter. I am coming to you from my studio here in Austin, and usually I film right here, just turn the other way. And so I wanted to give you a look at my work desk that I'm so proud of. I designed the whole thing myself. My husband helped me make it, and it is one of the most fabulous spaces that I have ever been in. It's very inspirational to me. And it took me a long time to figure out how to organize all my needles and yarn and have everything on display. And I'm very proud of it, actually. So this is a little bit behind the scenes look of what it kind of took / my journey. I think this is more of a journey of one of my favorite sweaters, one of the first sweaters that I knit more of one of, and it is the story of the Ranunculus. So this could be a pattern where you're so sick of hearing about it, to be honest, and I'm just not sick of talking about it, so too bad. So sad, right? I love this pattern. It is, well, it's a lot of things. It holds a really special place in my heart because it's one of what I found a complicated pattern at the time. I was a beginner knitter when I started knitting it. It was the first time that I used my circular interchangeable needles that I had at the time to make a sweater like this. It had lace work in it, slightly intimidated by that. It also had some different techniques that I was not familiar with, and I knit it up just fine, and it was a joy to knit. It really was. The process of knitting this sweater is really fun, and it's simple. It's simple fun. Simple, good old fun. That's really what it is. So I wanted, with Notes from a Knitter, it's really a behind the scenes kind of look at what it takes to knit these kinds of garments in my experience, and things that I learned along the way that I'm hoping can help you while you're knitting your own sweaters. So I want to talk about my first one that I knit. I knit this one with alpaca, and it's a gray yarn. And when I knit it again, I just wanted to knit this sweater. I was like, I love this yarn. I love this sweater pattern. When I looked at this sweater pattern, what really sold me was not that, like tens of thousands of people were knitting this. Currently 19,000 people have knit this on Ravelry and have shared their progress on Instagram. Over 19,000 on both platforms. So it's very, very popular. What really drew me to this pattern was how many different kinds of garments that you could make out of just one sweater pattern, just by choosing a different kind of yarn. And the examples on specifically Ravelry or Instagram are tremendous. Like, there's so many possibilities with this sweater, and that's what really sold me to this pattern. I was like, oh, I can buy this pattern, I can knit it more than once, and I can knit a different sweater each time. And it really rings true. It really does. The first time that I knit it, the cast on was an adventure. It was one of those things where I was like, am I doing this right? It is a crochet cast on with, I think, a tubular cast on combined. And when you knit that for the first time as a beginner knitter, you're kind of like, I think this is falling apart. I really think I broke my sweater. I do. I think I broke it. But what was really interesting is when you finish that cast on and it tells you to take off the provisional cast on, the sweater feels like it blossoms, kind of like a ranunculus, which I thought, okay, I love a good theme. I love a good thought process. I wonder if the knitwear designer thought like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to mess people up a little bit when I do that. I thought, oh my gosh, what an experience. So I really enjoyed that process. First, as a beginner knitter, knitting this one. And then, you know, things that I thought this pattern would be, and then it wasn't. It was just like a different kind of technique, really blew me away. For example, I thought that these were going to be, you know, like, I thought it was going to be like a cable. When I first saw the picture, I knew the lace work was in there, which is this part, but like these little areas right here, I thought this was like cable work. And so when I got there and then it wasn't, it was just a different technique. I thought, well, that was freaking cool. Like it was just a cool experience. And then once you're done with, you know, all of the yoke, which is like your key like technique work, then it's just stockinette stitch, and which is just mindless knitting, as we like to call it. It's easy. The cast off was really interesting. I think it's an I-cord bind off, I think, which I'd never done before. So I learned a lot of techniques with this one sweater, which is why I would encourage beginner knitters to go for it. I would say if you're wanting to learn a lot in just one sweater, it would be this one. And it doesn't look like it, but there are a lot of techniques in here. So I really enjoyed this. One other learning lesson that I had was definitely to alternate your skeins. As you can see, this sweater is two different colors. You got a bluish gray right here, and then you have a kind of like a dull gray going on down here. And that was an unexpected adventure. I did not know that was happening while I was knitting it until I was done. That doesn't mean that I don't wear this out in public. I do. I don't care. I knit the sweater. I dare somebody to say something to me. Actually, I dare somebody to say something to me about it so that I could tell them, no, I actually knit this. Let me tell you all about it. So, alternate your skeins when you're knitting. There's plenty of YouTube videos you can look at to figure out how to do that. Plenty of people have offered their tips and tricks on how to do that. So I would definitely, if you're not familiar on how to alternate your skeins, especially if you have some hand-dyed yarns from indie dyers when you're knitting a big sweater, I would definitely go check those out. It's really a lifesaver, especially if you buy a sweater's quantity of yarn, which is a huge investment. You know, some skeins might vary different colors, so it just kind of keeps the whole thing uniform, all the colors uniform, and flow together. So after I knit that one, I thought, you know, I'm going to put that away. It really marked a different point of my life where I was kind of going up in my career a little bit, being promoted. And then also we had our first little snowstorm. So around that time is when we had our first little snow in Austin. It's the first time that I saw like snow kind of blanket the ground for a couple of days. Just again, maybe like an inch. Nothing crazy, but it did shut down the whole city. And also, the Ranunculus is a little bit of a special note in my life. It was in my wedding bouquet, and I love that flower when choosing my wedding flowers, and also it was in my husband's boutonniere. So it was kind of like, oh, I like that little tie. So the second one I knit was completely unexpected, but it does mark another momentous time in my life, which was when I went to Rhinebeck for the first time and to Woolen Folk. And that was a thing that I've always wanted to do. I always wanted to go to a retreat or a festival or something where I got to hang out with knitters. Again, I started knitting, I think, and it was like 2018, 2019, maybe even, I think it was 2018. And then the pandemic hit. It was definitely something I wasn't, you know, I was too scared to go out and like do things just yet with other knitters. I was too like self-conscious about my beginning knitting skills to go out and like hang and be able to talk about knitting. I just felt like I wasn't experienced enough. And then 2020 came along, and then, you know, we're stuck in all day, which is a great craft to have during times when you're in lockdown, I'll tell you that. But finally able to get out and go meet other knitters, and I was so inspired being around other knitters at Woolen Folk and all this stuff. And then I saw a lady walk by. You know my story. I saw her walk by. She had this orange ranunculus. The sun was shining. It was fall. All of the leaves were changing. And I just thought, I want one of those. I want one of those. And not only do I want one of those, but I want one of those in just mohair, because when I bought this pattern, I saw that there was a just mohair example of the sweater. And I thought, I want to knit that one day. That is why I bought this pattern, was because of that example. And sure enough, this was the time to shine. This was the time to shine. So I had bought previously a sweater's quantity worth of mohair, and I just held it double on this one, and it came out awesome. And like I said, the feel of the sweater and the way it looks can be determined by the yarn that you choose. This feels like a dress up version of the sweater. Like, I wore it over dresses. I wore it to like functions where I had to dress up. You know, I had to be a little less more. It's Austin. Everything is casual, to be honest. You can go to like a 5-star restaurant in like jeans and a t-shirt. No one's going to say anything. Really, no one is going to say anything. But if I wanted to dress up, it would be with this. And so I got a lot of wear and tear out of it. One thing that I learned when knitting with mohair is, one, the hair is going to go everywhere, especially if it's, you know, a humid climate like this. Even in the wintertime, it's a little humid. It doesn't really get cold here until like December, and even sometimes in December, you have a hot December 25th. It doesn't feel like the holiday. It really doesn't. So it was kind of like I had to pick and choose my days when I was knitting this, because, you know, the mohair wouldn't slide on the needles. It would kind of get warm on my hands, and then it would kind of fuzz out. It wasn't really cold enough for me to knit this. So learning lesson, if I'm going to knit with mohair, might want to choose like January, February to knit it. The techniques were all fine. I found that it was a lot easier to knit with the mohair when it got towards the body. I was knitting with non-wooden needles, so the experience was a lot smoother with this one. I was using my Chiagu needles, which are, I think they're stainless steel, and so the yarn was just flowing. It was going and flowing, and it felt like an amazing process. One thing that I did note about this sweater in particular when knitting it the second time was, I really enjoy that after the yoke is done, you just get to knit stockinette. It just flows. It just like runs off the needles. It really does. And it's kind of like running a marathon a little bit. I've ran 2 half marathons, and it does feel like that. It's like the runner's high. You get a knitter's high. You know, you knit the yoke and you're kind of like excited, and then you go for the finish line and you're like, oh, that was just the best experience ever. And so that experience tied with, you know, my first time going to Rhinebeck, going to Woolen Folk, it felt special knitting this one. And I can't wait to wear it again this year. Like, I feel like it's a staple. It taught me how to make a little bit of a staple garment in my wardrobe that I can wear many times over. So this one was really special. And shocker, I am knitting my 3rd ranunculus. And so this is the little vessel I have. If you don't know me, I'm a gardener, and so sometimes I go to gardening shops, I find strange pots. This isn't strange. This is a Frida. And I will put my yarn in these vessels. So I'm holding this stubble. It is a merino, my first merino ranunculus. It's just another note on this. Knitting the same pattern with different kind of yarns is really interesting. You start to learn how different yarns act when knitted. And, you know, knitting with mohair, it was kind of hard to move around the needles, even with stainless steel needles, probably because of the humidity. It reacts to its environment a little bit, which was really interesting. The yak, the alpaca, I was, you know, using wooden needles. It was hard to move across. It wasn't as flexible. And I'm discovering that I really like wool. I really just love knitting with like merino, just different kinds of wool. I love the way it feels in my hands. I love the kind of like stretchiness to it. This one has a little bit of nylon in it because I know I'm going to wear it a lot. I tend to just want to grab the ranunculus whenever I'm, you know, going somewhere. And so it's just really interesting learning how you knit and what your tension's like. Same sweater, but different yarn. And seeing how this one is kind of knitting up a little bit, it's just really interesting. It's really interesting. And trying to get, sorry, let's scoot this over a little bit. So trying to get, just a grasp on what my favorite knitting technique is like. That's what I'm learning with this one, is like, okay, what do I really like about knitting? It's really getting me to figure out, is it the techniques, or is it the sweater, like what's in the sweater pattern? It's making me think a little bit differently about why I love to knit and what I'm loving about knitting this garment in particular. It changes with this pattern a lot. Again, I mentioned earlier, it feels like the sisterhood of the traveling pants, or maybe I didn't yet, but this pattern feels like the sisterhood of the traveling pants of knitting. Like, anyone that wears it looks absolutely gorgeous. And it all depends on the yarn that you choose. And I just find that fascinating. Honestly, you could do that with any pattern, but this one in particular, I mean, you're using one sized needle. You don't change your needle size, I don't think, for the ribbing at all. It's just one size needle. And so it's simple, it's easy, it's fast. So yeah, this one, another reason, or another note on the Ranunculus while I'm knitting this one is going to mark a different momentous moment in my life where I am really just leaning into my gut instincts on things. And I'm more involved with this YouTube journey than I've ever been. I love sharing ideas. I love talking to people. I'm slightly introverted, which means I have a lot of anxiety in public places. But here in my studio, I'm just fine. And I'm leaning into that, and just leaning into consistency, leaning into trusting my gut with things. Like this one is going to deal with a little bit of color work that I'm going to add to it to make my own. Leaning into wearing the color yellow a lot more, which is my favorite color. I don't know if you can tell. And it's a lot of things. It's also marking a moment in my life of my stained glass journey, which my first big ambitious enamel kind of experiment that I'm going to do with my new stained glass journey is, leaning more into knit art. And so my first enamel project is going to be the yoke of this sweater. It's going to be a round art piece. It's going to have this kind of glass. I'm looking at it right now because I've been saving it for years to do something like this. And I'll paint on it, and I can use enamels, and it'll be a very precious piece that maybe I'll keep or maybe I'll sell. Maybe I'll make two. I don't know. But it's going to mark a lot of things in this kind of knitting journey, stained glass journey that I have. And God, don't you just love knitting? Oh, I just love it. And anyway, I could go on and on. I hope you enjoyed this Notes from a Knitter episode. I plan on doing more of these kind of behind the scenes look on what it took, and also things that I learned specifically about one pattern that I want to expand on, and also different techniques. So if you like this kind of video, please share what you liked. I would love to give you and show you things that you want to see. And I'm also thinking about teaching my friends how to knit because they keep asking. And so just having an archive of videos of little like cast-ons and things, that'll be coming soon too, as soon as I can figure out a place to do it here in the studio. So more to come, but until then, I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. I hope you are inspired to knit your own ranunculus if you're a beginner knitter. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section, and I look forward to doing this again very, very soon. Thanks for joining. Bye.